Well, hello, everybody that's joining. We're just going to give another moment or two for the participants to join, for the attendees to join, and then we'll get started. Glad to see everybody this afternoon. All right, good afternoon. I'm James Brown with the STEM Education Coalition. Welcome to our briefing today on the education of STEM technicians. As we look at a changing economy, lots of different things moving up, moving down, moving sideways, as we all deal with now month 7 of COVID and its impact on the economy and the education system and on careers. And so what we have today is a panel to talk about the many facets of education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics related technician career paths. These are mostly jobs that don't involve the traditional 4-year track into the STEM fields, but many of them do, and many of them involve other pathways that we will talk about today. Some of them are booming, some of them are in standby, some of them are really seeing a lot of change, and we want to address several different industries, several different pathways. We've got a panel today that will cover that from a number of perspectives. Before we get started, let me just thank our sponsors for today's briefing, which are the American Chemical Society, the Society of Women Engineers, the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, the Universal Technical Institute, the Aviation Technician Education Council, the Education Development Center, and AnitaB.org. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who is Dr. Karen Johnson, Associate Professor, Department of Aviation Technologies at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. She also happens to be the Secretary and Treasurer and Journal Editor for the Aviation Technician Education Council. So Karen, the floor is yours.
All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. We appreciate you giving us your time. And I just want to thank James for inviting me to take part in this panel with everybody else. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a couple slides just to share with everybody. It's going. Okay, is that good? Can you see that? Okay, so a couple of numbers I just wanted to put out before I really get into the education trends side. As James mentioned, of course, we're seeing a slowdown in many industries. Aviation is one of them due to the restrictions from COVID. But there is still a positive outlook for maintenance technician jobs in the aviation industry. And the Boeing outlook just came out recently, and it's still predicting nearly 750,000 jobs over the next 20 years. And I think it's also worth pointing out that the previous year's outlook, so prior to COVID-19, this number was only slightly higher at 750,000. So we really haven't seen a very large decrease just because of the COVID. So the jobs are still there. And then the other number that I kind of wanted to share was the amount of our graduates from aviation technician training programs. Most of them, nearly 90%, go to support the airline industry. So there is still a huge job path for graduates of these types of training programs. Some of the trends that we're now seeing in education has certainly changed and kind of sped up because of COVID-19 restrictions. But one that has always been there is needs from the industry member, the aviation industry members. We need their partnership, we need investments, things like equipment, training programs that we can collaborate on with them. But now more than ever, because of COVID-19, we're also beginning to see increases in the IT costs at universities and colleges. And that's because with COVID-19, now we're starting to do all of this online training. And for most of us who have been in the industry, in the education industry for a while, we're not used to doing online training for such a hands-on technical type curriculum. And so our IT departments and our universities and colleges are really having to step up and support us. And so their needs are increasing as well, obviously. The other thing that we're kind of seeing a push towards, and this is a very new push in my sector, in the aviation maintenance technician education sector, is the push for stuff like augmented reality and virtual reality and simulation type instructional tools. in the past, the FAA restrictions have really dampened our ability to use tools like that, because there's been a lot of hurdles for schools to have to jump over to do any kind of online or digital based training. Now with the COVID situation, that is being really opened up and fast tracked. And so this is kind of where we're seeing a focus now, in addition to the online delivery that just involves lectures and readings and stuff like this. Now we have this added element that we're really trying to open up so that we can get some simulation to the students before they show up in our hangars for the actual hands-on physical training. And so what we're seeing now is that there are some independent entities out there who are starting to create these really high fidelity digital tools. Clemson University has the Center for Workforce Development. They've started in on this, and they've got a whole module just for aviation maintenance training, and they're still in the process of rounding that out. But that's just one example. There's other entities out there doing the same thing. There's individuals like me, I'm one of them, who is working on grant projects to help develop some virtual reality tools for our curriculum. And then we also have community-wide members like ATEC, the Aviation Technician Education Council, and their sister 501c3 is called Choose Aerospace. And their big push right now is development of these digital type tools to help with the more technical hands-on type training elements of our curriculum. And if you don't know, the FAA requirements for our curriculum is very strict. We have a very guidelines that we have to follow. And so we're trying to make these tools, these new tools that we're being allowed to use, fit into that curriculum. And then the biggest challenge that we're facing now is the funding aspect of it. Most schools, especially if it's a state funded school, getting the funding to purchase these types of digital tools is a difficult task. And so we're seeing a lot of grant work from this and using a lot of grant funded projects to help create it, and then also to help purchase it for use in the schools. And so that's kind of, that's the really big focus right now in aviation maintenance training education, is how to get over not having our face-to-face, since we are so hands-on and technical based curriculum. So James, that's all I have. Try to keep it short.
Well, thank you very much for that perspective. Now we're going to turn to Walt Langley, Vice President of Industry Alliances at Universal Technical Institute. Walt, the floor is yours.
Okay, get myself off mute here and share my screen. Okay, hopefully we can see that.
It's getting started. We can see your slide.
Good. Okay, this is a great topic, and we could spend days literally talking about it. I'm Vice President of Industry Alliances with UTI, and my job is to work with manufacturers to develop advanced training programs specific to their brands to support their dealer networks around the country. UTI, a very brief commercial on us. We've been around for 55 years. We've graduated over 220,000 students since 1965. And today we've got a little bit over 11,000 students active at our campus network around the country. But the takeaway from this particular slide is the 86% employment rate, something we're really proud of, because that's the end game for a student coming to UTI, is of course getting careers in the transportation industry. The network I talked about, this is a network of our campuses around the country. We're coast to coast. And these campuses cover auto, diesel, motorcycle, marine, welding, and CNC technicians. So much like the airline industry, we've also got very sophisticated machinery that we're training on. This is an example of a Ford vehicle that has over 100 million lines of code. This is just an example of how sophisticated vehicles have become. I've been in the industry all my adult life, ran product groups for Volvo and Ford, and I can tell you that the systems that are out there today, which are primarily driven by computer design programs, require a different type of technician. So you need that hands-on tech, but that tech has to have a different level of skill set today than they have in the past. They literally have to become computer diagnosticians, excuse me, as well as your traditional technician. How do we get there? Well, we partner with our industry partners, the OEMs I spoke about. Our OEM partnerships, you can see some examples up there, cover some 35 leading brands, and we have specialized programs that support each of those brands that are up there. And much like the airline industry, there's a significant portion of this curriculum that is hands-on. So with COVID, we were forced into finding some new solutions to balance the need for social distancing, for online training, and then, of course, to get students back on campus to achieve the required online training or hands-on training is required. Our industry partners support our students. So this is the end game I talked about earlier, the 86%. We have over 4,500 verified locations where employers are supporting students with tuition reimbursement, with grants, tool allowances, scholarships, et cetera, because it's a very competitive market. And again, here's some examples of what our employers are doing to attract these graduates. They're in extremely high demand. All schools combined don't generate enough graduates to meet the demand of the industry. As an example, this is according to BLS information, each year we're looking for 118,000 technicians, yet all schools in the transportation sector combined are only generating about 50,000 graduates. So the challenge is out there for the schools to become more adept at providing not only the hands-on training, but the distance training that the industry has actually evolved into. So the COVID impact, that's really what's driving a lot of the things that we're seeing in education today, with so many Americans losing their jobs, high unemployment rates around the country, yet there's still demand for technicians in auto and diesel. These are essentially essential services that kept the country running during the pandemic time period we were in earlier this year. Here's a couple of examples of students that actually go through advanced training that I spoke about earlier. Some recent graduates where we've had over 95% placement rate. In fact, I've got a program that doesn't graduate until Friday of this week. It's the Peterbilt truck program. And I'm happy to say that 100% of the students who are graduating this Friday already have confirmed job offers and will be going to work here in the next couple of weeks. So our response to COVID, well, it had to be quick. We had so much of our training is done at the campuses. We had to move to online delivery of training to provide continuity to some 8,000 students that were displaced because we weren't able to get students back to the campuses. We were already in the process of developing some online materials and online delivery to many of our students, but this accelerated. The sense of urgency of COVID caused us to accelerate that. And we were able to do that in fine order. At the same time, we still have to have that hands-on requirement that's required by the manufacturers and by employers to get their necessary training. And so we're able to do this by working with health authorities around the country, providing CDC guidelines to each of our campuses and comply with those. As you can see, the representation of a face mask there, but it's more than that. It's social distancing and sanitizing various aspects of the training aids that we use in the curriculum, et cetera. So this is something that we did, but we're already on track to do something like this. And where we're going for the future is we've made a commitment to something called blended learning. Blended learning is the combination of online lectures and demonstrations along with hands-on lab training. The types of training that's required in our industry as well as the airline industry does require the students to demonstrate their skills capability, but at the same time, we're leveraging the ability to deliver classes online. And in fact, we've got a new member to our management team, Dr. Jeffrey Bergen. He's an expert, nationally known expert in this field. He's published numerous articles on blended learning and specializes in mobile, accessible, and cloud-based education platforms. So he's going to help lead the charge to make a good process even better going forward and make it more deliverable to students on various devices that they have available to them. So I rushed through that. I'm sure I left something out, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Walt. Much appreciated. So let me just also thank our, this is the first time we're simulcasting a briefing on YouTube. So thank you to those of you who are joining us by YouTube today. We were to have as our next speaker, Dr. Tamika Duplessis, who is the Vice-Chancellor for Student Affairs at Delgado Community College in Louisiana. Unfortunately, she is dealing with the hurricane today. So our thoughts go out to her as she wanted to join with us to talk more about technicians. And we're going to go a little bit out of order because our fifth speaker is running a little bit late today. So we're going to turn to Dr. David Baker, Professor of Chemistry at Delta College in Michigan. Dr. Baker, the floor is yours.
Thank you, James. So I'm assuming you can all see that. It's nice and big, right? You're good? Okay, so I just wanted to point out my colleague Tamika was going to talk about the American the chemical technicians and their roles and their activities. So if you do have any questions related to chemical technicians, I'll be happy to address many of them. I'm sure, knowing Tamika, she was probably very well organized and she probably could have answered all your questions with a clear, accurate comments. So if you do have any questions, let me know. So my focus is on what sort of activities are the societies and committees across the country helping with. We've got national societies. The American Chemical Society comes to mind. And here's a profile of the things that they're involved with. But I just want to clear out some ideas that what we're struggling with COVID, and particularly how we're communicating this information. So typically the American Chemical Society, as an example, on a national level helps with accreditation of programs. It helps identify critical educational criteria. It helps review and assess programs. It provides documentation and sort of an envelope on which to develop a course and a program. So that helps us. But as you know, we want to develop lifelong learners. So clearly we have to keep reviewing this to make sure new technologies and new equipment that we're using becomes available. So that's part of that. So the ACA and the national accreditation facilitates all of that. So that's part of where we're at doing that. So it assists technicians in developing forward. Clearly, conferences and workshops are ideal locations to expand our technicians, to expand their own horizons and see the potential beyond where they started off on the lab bench work. Now, obviously, conferences and workshops are a challenge. We do have a lot of webinars, but I know that many of my colleagues, particularly those at the bench level, after a hard day's work, the last thing you want to do is be in more of a Zoom. So that has been a challenge for all of us. And then the national committees and societies do provide a lot of career advice, a lot of support. I have to say, I have been inundated. My email box is constantly full of things that are making me available, career advice, support, suggestions, ideas. It also provides support for technicians to develop their own careers. There are small committees focused on technicians, so we can encourage them to become leaders in their little environments. And that seems to help them sort of balance their lab work and their activities with a greater development beyond that. Now, in the local level, particularly here in Michigan, I can speak a lot to things that are happening. We know that local societies and committees, they work with college programs, they work on advisory boards, they drive that change, they drive those challenges. Clearly under the COVID, we haven't met. The institution is very rigorous in keeping everybody off campus. So there's been a challenge to do that. And there's been a reluctance to sort of engage people on the advisory board, the technicians, because they're so busy. So we sort of balance that off. So I would say we haven't had a hiatus, and it will probably go on until next March before we have a confirmed meeting. So things can be challenging. Development of the pipeline of future technicians. There was a lot of outreach. There's a lot of involvement from local committees and societies to engage high schoolers to say, these are potential jobs, these are great opportunities. All of that's broken down with COVID issues. We don't seem to see enough people. We like that face-to-face interaction. We like to see the enthusiasm of our students. We like to use our STEM Explorer opportunities to outreach to high schools. None of that's happening. So again, we're challenged. Internships and co-op positions. We know about those. We let the industry know. Industry helps us move those people forward. As far as I'm aware, most of these co-ops are still employed by our local area scientists and companies. So that's okay. But the problem is we're not developing a pipeline. Our pipeline is slowed. Our bandwidth, as it were, has been significantly narrowed. And as you know, Technicians, like everybody else, need support and mentoring, a lot of social activity. We used to do outreach. We used to have parties. We used to go to activities. None of that's happening. I actually completed a survey last week. 65% of our members want a meeting for Christmas in some sort of social outing, even if it's outside in Michigan in the snow. We need to see each other. So clearly, development of activities are kind of exciting, but those are failing. Our mentorship of one another, that seems to have strengthened because we're keeping contact. We've got all these media. We don't have a Twitter account, but we have emails, we have connections, we have chat. And so that's building. That's a strength that we have, but we are concerned that there's not enough support in that. And so as we move forward on the second perspective is the changing public and societal perceptions. How is that happening? Well, we're doing a terrible job. Okay, we as scientists, we as lab bench chemists, trying to develop these careers. Yes, we can provide publications. Yes, we're on social media. Yes, we do work with government agencies. All of this has come to a standstill. You know, we used to have volunteers who would work with Lansing in Michigan. That's not happening. So it's a huge problem. Continuous engagement and enthusiasm. It seems to be working. We did have a lot of retirees who were involved, but now that is struggling. So that continuous engagement of students, of technicians to say, these are possible careers, these are possible opportunities, that's falling apart. But we still are involved in those. These are still all categories that are discussed at our meetings. They've not been lost. They're still part of our conversation. In terms of a local outreach, our outreach locally is big. It's a great opportunity to recruit students to our programs, to become technicians, to understand their responsibilities, to engage them. That is not happening, okay? From being, say, at the county fair to, say, at a local farmers market activity or an event in the city, all of that's closed down. So that's really impeding us in terms of building our pipeline. So we haven't even addressed any of the technology issues. We're trying to develop, sort of make sure the pipeline is filled for the future. We don't want to have these students engaged in technical skills and yet have no practical hands-on opportunities. That's where we're challenged. Okay, we do see that as a big problem. Community engagement and volunteer work. People are happy to do volunteer work, but with all of these concerns and wearing masks, we have a reluctance for people to gather. But we do have a sense that many of these want to gather so that they can work with one another. They want to be part of a bigger community. So there you have my sort of summary comments there. I hope I didn't rush those, James. I hope that helps. But if you've got a question, you look like you've got a question.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And you touched on one of the questions that we've already got from the audience, and as our fifth speaker joins, we'll leave a little bit of time for her to give our remarks in the midst of the questions. But let's move to some of these questions. So the last question we got here, and Dr. Baker, I'm gonna start this off and then dish it to you. So the question was: there's a perception that skilled trades, like those being discussed today, are to not STEM careers. How do you respond to that claim?
I'd say that was completely false. These people these are highly skilled individuals. They use engineering skills, they use problem solving skills, critical thinking skills. They are clearly well-developed scientific activities, especially in the lab and in the bench chemistry. Go ahead.
Anyone else want to respond to this question about, I think it's fundamental to our understanding of STEM careers to be clear about what we intend are all the various different career paths, and technicians are very much STEM careers. It's it's a question parents have, it's a question schools have about these outcomes. I'd like to, Walt, can you respond to this, and Dr. Johnson as well?
Dr. Johnson, after you.
Thanks, Walt. I think one of the things that I just my opinion, what I believe people get hung up on in the acronym of STEM technologies, I think there's this kind of error in the perception that technologies is only dealing with, the digital type technologies. Technologies is a very broad spectrum. And so all of us up here today, and I'm probably more closely related to what Walt does as far as the mechanical technician side, we deal with technology every day. maybe it's not a digital-based technology, but some of it is, as Walt explained on that Ford. You know, we also have a whole avionics portion of our training, and so there is that kind of digital technology that involved in, but everything else that we deal with on a daily basis is technological. It's technologies.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I've seen just in the 10 years I've been with UTI, and certainly in the industry, but in the last 10 years, the move towards digital technology in terms of the control systems of all types of vehicles. That Ford truck I showed you on my presentation, there's more lines of code in that vehicle than the Apollo space shuttle. So it's without a doubt, it takes a different type of technician, a different type of training, but technology is absolutely at the forefront of everything that goes into our curriculum, which is why our curriculum changes so frequently. We've got, particularly in the advanced training programs where new vehicles are coming out, we're updating that curriculum on sometimes as frequently as a quarterly basis.
So, Utaukwa, thanks so much for joining us. We know we're all in busy schedules today, and we've covered a lot of bases in terms of the different career paths and different industries. I'd like to turn the floor over to you for a minute to just talk about what you see in terms of trends in information technology and digital technician careers from your perspective at Microsoft. And Utaukwa Allen is Senior Director of Global Community Development for Microsoft. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, James. I'm really looking forward to presenting today. And I am sharing my screen here. 1 second.
It's 11%.
1 second. All right. Thanks again for the introduction. Had a few technical difficulties. We all know that COVID has dramatically increased the need for our work around digital skilling. We're going to just back up a little bit. I wanted to first introduce myself. My name is Utaukwa Allen. I'm a Senior Director at Microsoft. I lead the Data Center Community Development Team. And I am delighted to speak to you today about digital skills and what we're doing at Microsoft and how we can better ensure that we're making great partnerships with education institutions. And so at Microsoft, we really focus on making sure that we are empowering every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. And what this really means is making sure that we're empowering people with digital skills to succeed. One of the best ways that we can do this is by partnering with community colleges and making sure that the technical training and skills are best in class. We understand that COVID-19 has dramatically increased the need for this work as communities face high levels of unemployment and displacement. There is a critical need for accessible and affordable skilling opportunities. As consumers, students, and employees face remote shopping demands, social demands, learning, working, and healthcare demands for digital access, we become increasingly more reliant on the digital economy. In 2020, spending in the US is forecasted to be more than $1.7 trillion across hardware, software, services, and telecommunications. And 13 million new tech jobs are estimated by 2025. To meet the demands of this new market, our industry must first continue to pivot to the approach that a four-year degree isn't required to develop a technology career, And second, that we continue to partner with colleges that focus on technician training to deliver more opportunities to more people. And so I'll talk a little bit today about the ways that we at Microsoft are leveraging some of these ideas. We know that in June, Brad Smith unveiled Microsoft's Digital Skilling Initiative, really designed to help train 25 million people around the globe to gain new skills for the digital economy. One of our key investment areas around digital skilling for job seekers is free access to learning content. So job seekers have access to a repository of learning from LinkedIn Learning, Microsoft Learn, GitHub Learning Lab, ranging from entry-level digital literacy skills to advanced skills that will prepare job seekers for technical roles. Microsoft Learn for Educators provides access to a curriculum of Microsoft learning products on Microsoft Azure, Azure Data, AI, and Power Platform fundamentals. Our community college partners have been instrumental in promoting these opportunities to students, staff, and residents in and around the communities in which we operate. In addition to offering these self-driven resources, we have another program called our Microsoft Data Center Academy. We partner with community colleges to provide IT curriculum support, scholarships for tuition and certifications, mock data center labs, and help train educators on industry standard certifications like CompTIA A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, helping them prepare students for real-world job requirements. And we know that there is compelling data to show that certifications can have a significant impact on job acquisition, career advancement, and salary increases. This is starting to change the long-held view that success in the IT sector only comes from a university degree. Non-degree credentials can give far more people a chance at a livable income at a faster rate with less postgraduate debt. For high school students, we have the Microsoft TILS program. This is Technology, Education, and Literacy in Schools. It supports teachers through connections with industry volunteers. Currently, TILS connects teachers across more than 455 classrooms with 1,500 tech industry volunteers across more than 650 companies. Teachers learn to teach computer science independently over time to ensure that all young people are equipped for future work in the digital economy. There's a link at the end of the deck that I'll share. Applications are now open for high schools to apply for this program. Another area that private sector tech companies can drive impact is through donations. So Microsoft donates software and laptops to schools. Through our Data Center Academy, we donate decommissioned servers and net devices to community colleges and work with our general contractors to build mock data centers. In this way, IT students can learn on real equipment and perform real-world fixes and updates. We provide cash grants, technology, and resources to increase the capacity of education organizations to develop and grow high-caliber IT programs. Lastly, I'll just talk about, making sure that we leverage our most valuable assets, our employees. The spirit of giving is one of the most unique aspects of Microsoft culture. Employees volunteer in a lot of different ways. Some create panels at community colleges to discuss the pathway into careers in IT. Others volunteer with nonprofit partners to judge hackathons. In our data center communities, our employees work with community colleges to set up decommissioned servers in these DC mock labs, as well as provide coaching and training to both scholars and educators. And, I just want to wrap up by saying we really have a tremendous effort to support this digital skills gap. In 2019, Microsoft partnered with over 100 nonprofits, which included community college foundations across 42 countries, enabling millions of people with digital skills. digital skills training is a huge task and responsibility, likely one that one company can't drive and deliver independently. I hope that some of the ways in which Microsoft is showing up and partnering with community colleges inspired continued partnerships between community colleges, the public sector, and private tech institutions. To learn more about any of the initiatives that I talked about today, please follow the links on the website. And thanks again for your time today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that very much. So now we're going to open up the floor for questions. We've got a couple already, and we'll turn to those first. So Walt, we've got a question here for you. Can you talk about the TRIP program at the Universal Technical Institute?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As I showed in the presentation, we have verified 4,500 employment locations where dealers and other employers are offering our students incentives to come to work for them. That typically is a combination of things, but tuition reimbursement is very dominant amongst these employers. Tuition reimbursement is simply a way to offset some of the cost for a student that has gone through the education at a UTI, and it's paid out as more or less a retention bonus. So as the individual continues to work for the employer, there's an additional financial incentive for them to stay there because they get a certain amount of income per month to offset their student loans. It's the average program today, the value is about $13,800, and some of these programs run as high as $40,000 in terms of value.
Well, you know, one of the things I think we're all sort of dealing with as we talked about, you know, perceptions of STEM careers and whether technicians are seen as part of the STEM career path. I think that is a common misperception. It's certainly generational. If you ask people about images of careers, they do not often talk about these technician careers. But I think one of the things that gets lost is some of the outcomes associated with high-end technical skills, non-four-year degrees, or just people who are technicians and are not working in offices necessarily, or working with their hands. You know, we don't even have a good vocabulary for this in a lot of ways to share with people, because, you know, people of my generation would call these blue-collar workers. They're not blue-collar workers anymore. They're not wearing uniforms in factories, right? They're working lots of different paths. And I'd like to spend at least a little bit talking about, you know, so one of the questions here was, you mentioned that a four-year degree is no longer necessary for a successful career pathway. I agree, says the question, but but how do you get that message out to school counselors and parents? In other words, how do we close those gaps, right? Is it showing what a Porsche technician makes as a living? I don't know that it's all about dollars. I think it's about, you know, showing that people are doing what they want to do and having a good time in their careers and advancing in that way. So let me just open this up to whom wants to answer first, and just hold up your hand if you want to go first. Utaukwa, you've got the floor.
Okay. Yeah, I'll say that, you know, one of the things that is essential for parents and students to understand the breadth of opportunities in this space is mentoring and exposure, right? So opportunities, there are a number of high schools, for example, that have dual enrollment opportunities with community colleges. This is a great way for students to get early exposure to opportunities in the field. We know that a lot of corporations, including Microsoft, have opportunities for mentoring and shadowing. Again, you know, firsthand access to people that are living, working and breathing IT tech careers. So it's really about exposure, knowledge, and informing parents and students about these opportunities in their own backyard.
Anyone else want to jump in on this?
I think I would add to that, is the fact that everyone sees this as a lower tier career, and it's not a lower tier career. It's just a different trajectory. You're learning the same skills. You're working along the side with the same people. It's just trying to get parents, especially parents, to try and see and navigate this, that this is less expensive. Your child will get as many career opportunities. It's not on a lower level. And eventually, if they choose to, they can move to that other tier. It's not a glass ceiling. It is not a limiting factor that the old traditional blue collar was. That's a misconception, that it is an opportunity to engage people, to be interested in, to do things that they're interested in with their hands. And if they want to, they can continue to do that for the rest of their lives, or they can move on within that career environment. So it's not limiting. And as Utaukwa said, it's important to see that you can begin to do this as a junior in high school. You can do dual enrolled.
Walt?
Yeah, we actually at UTI, we start by educating high school counselors and instructors at the high school level. Our admissions team goes to some 10,000 high schools each year. We're talking to generally about 230, 240,000 potential candidates to come to UTI, but the challenge is to educate. And so we educate not only students, but high school counselors that there are opportunities outside of a four-year degree program, and then we give them some comparison data so they can make an informed decision. That informed decision gets down to do what you want to do something you have a passion for, but look at the facts, realities. What are the income opportunities? What are the advancement opportunities? And so we've got a number of UTI graduates over the years that have gone from being a frontline tech to now they're actually executives at automotive OEM companies out there. So that's a big part of it, is just educating right down to the high school and grammar school level. You've got to start early and often to make sure that these careers aren't shunned because of a perception. Cox Automotive recently did a survey of a number of Gen Z people and found that about a third of them would consider a career in the automotive industry. Of that third, a third of those, or 10% of the total, would actually consider a job as an automotive technician. That doesn't come anywhere close to meeting the need of the industry. So it's continual education, and that's the approach we take.
So let me turn this conversation to public policy for a minute. So where are the barriers as you see them, and in enabling more students, more kids who might want to go into these fields but are otherwise choosing not to? Well, can somebody take the first stab at talking about what some of those barriers might be in public policy? Karen, do I see you wanting to answer this?
Yeah, maybe. I'm trying to think about the FAA. We certainly have a significant set of restrictions that we have to deal with as far as the FAA goes with our curriculum delivery, aside from the development of the curriculum, but the actually delivery. We have a lot of hurdles that we have to jump. And so there's actually a Part 147 Act out there right now where we're trying to get our regulation, our FAA regulations for our curriculum delivery updated. They haven't been updated in 30 plus years. And so for my sector, my little niche in the technician education industry, those policies that are quite restrictive because they were made so long ago, that's our biggest hurdle right now, is getting those changed. And like I said, there's an act on the floor right now that we're trying to get pushed through the process in order to get that done. But the limiting factor there is that we haven't been able to do like satellite campuses, and we haven't been able to do dual enrollment like everybody's been talking about because of the restrictions that the FAA has on our types of training programs. So hopefully those changes will open these doors for us so that we can do what Walt and Dave and Utaukwa are talking about. We've just been really limited up until now.
Others? David?
Yeah, I don't see any limitations to what we do. I don't see any challenges. It's just it's really about changing society's view, that disregarding what you said originally, James, about this idea of blue collar. Okay, that's not what it is.
Walt, are you Utaukwa?
The only thing I would say is, based on my experience in the auto industry, that I thought was a highly regulated industry. And now that I'm on the educational side, we are just covered up with regulations. And rightfully so in many respects, because you want to make sure you're providing value. UTI has demonstrated we add value by the numbers of placements we have, but there's an awful lot of regulation, and I know we're constantly working with legislatures around the country to make sense of the ones that make sense.
Well, but let me drill down on this a little bit further, though, because one of the arguments I've heard from lots of advocates for the STEM technician track is just look at the value for money and time of going through some non-traditional track versus the more traditional 4-year degree track to a degree. I mean, most of the technician tracks take less than 4 years to achieve. Lots of them have higher yields. Some of them are lower cost. I mean, what can we say about how we measure outcomes in terms of the efficiency of an education and the value for the dollar and how it relates to STEM technician training? Anyone want to take that?
To correlate that is the fact that so many of the students doing these programs are stay at home. There's a huge less expense. They get a chance to stay with family. There's a great deal more support for that. You know, sometimes when you go off to college, there's a challenge of a support system. And all of a sudden you're working close to home, you're going to a college close to home. And before you know it, you found a related internship or co-op position that allows you to work part-time and go to class part-time. And all of a sudden you have the best of both worlds. You're earning an income to pay for your college. So if you want to drill down, that's how you sort of build that community, is it's right there. Everything's available to you.
Anyone else?
I just like to chime in and talk about, you know, our COVID-19 sort of landscape right now. And there are a lot of people that are displaced, that are facing this challenge of what do I do next? My industry has been hit pretty hard. And, you know, they're looking for something that's really responsive, accessible, and cost efficient for their families, right? And so investing in a 4-year degree may not be something that they could do at this moment in time. And so we need to think about what that landscape looks like and what accessible opportunities we can make in people's neighborhoods, such as community college programs that are accessible, virtual, right, and easy to access, right? And so I think a lot of people are going to be asking these questions, right, as they're entering this market of not knowing what's next for their careers. And this is a great opportunity for us to really push this conversation further.
Well, and this is a good chance to turn to one of the questions we got from the audience. So Karen, this is addressed to you. It says, Karen, the perception is that with airlines laying off thousands of employees, that technicians are being laid off as well. How are you getting out the message that techs are still in big demand?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very much a grassroots effort by each of the individual schools to set up programs with their local high schools to get out there, like Walt was talking about, and talk to the counselors, talk to the teachers, get some time with some FaceTime with the students and explain what's going on. So it's very much grassroots. However, the FAA is very aware of the technician shortage that we're facing, even during, like the numbers I showed you, even right now during the COVID crisis. So the FAA actually has a workforce pipeline grant in the process. It's already been funded. It just needs to be appropriated, where the grants are going to focus on how do we build this pipeline, because we know we have this technician shortage coming. And so those pipeline grants will fund projects like I just talked about, with schools working with industry members and local school systems, and building a partnership to get the word out there that, you know, we need technicians.
Excellent. So we've got one more question from the audience, and I think I'll make this our last question because it kind of knits together some of the topics we're talking about. So David, this was directed at you, but I'm going to expand it a little bit. It says Mike Rowe is out there on social media promoting skilled trades. Is that helpful in creating interest? So start off by answering that, and then talk about who I would like each of you to throw out somebody you'd like to see, or conceptually what you'd like to see as a role model for STEM technicians looking at this going forward. Is Mike Rowe our role model, David? Where do we go with this?
It certainly is. With the COVID lockdown, it certainly provides an opportunity for students to realize that you could. The great thing about Mike Rowe is that you can learn coding while you're at home, right? Some of our technical skills, I need you at the bench. I need you to get hands-on work. And that's where my challenge is during the COVID lockdown, is how do we do that? But, you know, I mean, we have a lot of technicians that, you know, everybody forgets that if it's a business critical activity, the people, the bench people, the lab workers, the technicians, they were in doing the business critical work. The supervisors were not in. They were the frontline people of the science community, of the STEM project. So see them as essential. I mean, That's full stop.
Walt, did you want to get in on this?
Yeah, I chuckled a little bit when you mentioned Mike's name. We've actually partnered with Mike in the past. A great spokesman, adds a little humor to the reality of what's going on out there with skilled trades jobs. He's an excellent spokesman for trade skills, and really kind of brings it home that there's career opportunities, financial opportunities, security, et cetera, in the skilled trades industries out there. So he's an excellent supporter of that.
So others about role models?
I would add that I think one of the most valuable role models or groups of role models that we can show to younger students, especially in high school, is recent graduates who are kind of new to their jobs. We talk about this generational gap and this perception that exists because of the generation, the difference in generations. For a high school kid to see a 20-something-year-old who had just finished one of these technician training programs and they're out there in a successful job and they can come and talk to them, I mean, that there's a connection there. So programs that can facilitate those types of interactions, I think are priceless.
So
Utaukwa,
I'm going to give you the last word on this question.
All right. I think about two opportunities. One would be, especially for first generation families where someone is really just entering this IT sector, entering a technician, those local connections to residents, family members, community members that can come back to the school or come back to a high school and tell their stories about, I'm just like you. And see where I am, this can be you as well. It's super meaningful, especially if that family doesn't have exposure to those types of opportunities. And then second, I don't necessarily know what this looks like in COVID, but there's been great success in a lot of our communities with trade shows and events, bringing a lot of people together from community colleges as well as from industries, right? And kind of bringing equipment that kids can play on and get really excited about, right? And put their hands on things and showing about like what that curriculum would look like and everybody coming together in the same space to really advance these opportunities in a meaningful way.
Thank you so much for that. And thanks to all of our speakers today. Really enjoyed this discussion. It's really very timely to look at different career paths in a time when everything is changing. So thank you again. Thanks to everybody who joined us from Capitol Hill and the federal agencies and on YouTube and online. So thank you very much for that. Look for our next briefing in November after the elections and talking about what we've learned from a recent survey of the conditions on the ground in K-12 schools. And we'll also look at what the election means for public policy going forward. So thanks everyone, and see you again in November.